Ladies, you are not created to chase after validation. You were born with it. You are not a product of a man's opinion. You are the expression of God's intention. The moment you lose sight of your divine identity, you begin to operate beneath your design. A woman disconnected from her purpose becomes easy to manipulate, quick to settle, and blind to her own worth. If you don't know why you were created, any man can assign you a role that doesn't belong to you. And when you start living by that counterfeit identity, your value in his eyes begins to fade. You must reconnect to the one who authored your soul before you ever try to build your life around someone else. One of the greatest enemies to your dignity is overgiving. I'm talking about giving your time, your body, your energy without discernment. A woman who does not know how to say no is not walking in strength. She is walking in fear. The fear of being abandoned. The fear of being unloved. But love is not proven by how much you pour out. It is proven by how much you protect what is sacred. When you constantly give without boundaries, you stop being a blessing and start being taken for granted. And let me tell you something. What is constantly available without price becomes common in the eyes of a man. Protect your oil. Protect your peace. There's a lie that's been sold to women for generations that you need a man to tell you who you are. That unless someone says you're beautiful, you are not. That unless someone chooses you, you have no value. But hear me, if you have to keep asking for approval, you've already forgotten you are royalty. When a woman habitually seeks validation, she communicates insecurity, not strength. And the moment you need a man more than you need your God, you have already made an idol of him. No man can affirm what you refuse to believe about yourself. The most attractive woman in the world is the one who knows who she is, even when no one claps for her. Many women lose their value by tolerating what should have been confronted. When you make excuses for his disrespect, when you ignore the red flags, when you allow inconsistency to live rent-free in your life, you are teaching him how to dishonor you. Never forget, silence is agreement. If you don't stand up for your soul, he will never learn how to cover it. A woman who allows her peace to be disturbed in the name of love is not operating in faith. She is operating in fear. Real love never demands that you sacrifice your dignity. Real love covers, honors, and protects. Now, hear me clearly. God did not call you to be a savior. You are not the Holy Spirit. You cannot fix a man who refuses to fix himself. If you spend all your energy mothering a man, you will lose the space to be a wife. There is a difference between helping a man grow and carrying his immaturity. When you become his crutch, you destroy his ability to stand, and a man who doesn't have to lead will eventually stop respecting the one who leads for him. You are a helper, not a rescuer. Don't rob a man of his responsibility while robbing yourself of your royalty. Some of you have silenced your voice to keep peace in relationships that are already breaking your spirit. You've buried your dreams. You've muted your convictions. You've numbed your pain just to make a man feel comfortable. But listen, your voice is part of your value. God gave it to you because it carries truth. It carries wisdom. It carries the sound of heaven. If a man cannot handle your voice, he cannot handle your destiny. Stop shrinking to fit places God is trying to free you from. You were not made to live in fear of rejection. You were made to walk in the authority of your calling. And finally, never trade your standards for the illusion of companionship. A woman who lowers her expectations to keep a man is a woman who has already abandoned her throne. You were not created to beg for love. You were created to command it by the way you carry yourself. Compromise is not always a sign of love. It's often a sign of loneliness. And loneliness is not a good reason to enter into spiritual bankruptcy. The man God has for you will not be intimidated by your standards. He will rise to meet them. When a woman neglects her purpose and identity in God, she steps outside of divine order and begins to operate in confusion. She was never created to define herself by relationships, achievements, or external beauty. Her identity was established long before any man laid eyes on her. The danger of neglecting purpose is that you open yourself up to being molded by culture, pressured by society, and controlled by emotional need. Purpose is not something you create. It is something you discover in the presence of your Creator. And when you disconnect from God, you lose access to the blueprint that defines your worth. Without that anchor, a woman begins to measure her value by how much attention she receives, how desired she is, or how useful she becomes to others. But true identity is never rooted in what you do for people. It is rooted in who you are in God. When a woman forgets her purpose, she often attaches herself to men who are never qualified to walk with her destiny. She begins to accept roles that feel safe, but are spiritually beneath her. She starts tolerating environments that suppress her gifts just to keep emotional peace. When you don't know what you carry, you will allow others to mishandle it. A man cannot value a woman who does not value herself, and a woman who neglects the voice of God in her life begins to live by the voices around her. That is why emotional strength comes from spiritual alignment. A woman grounded in purpose walks with clarity, speaks with authority, and loves with discernment. She doesn't chase validation because she already carries divine confirmation. Your purpose is not just about what you do, it's about who you are becoming. When you neglect that, you don't just lose direction, you lose definition. Overgiving without boundaries is not a sign of love, it is a reflection of broken identity. Many women have been conditioned to believe that in order to be loved, they must constantly prove their worth through sacrifice. So they give their time, their energy, their emotions, even their bodies, hoping that their generosity will earn loyalty or affection. But what you give without discernment can be taken without appreciation. A woman who overgives trains the people around her to expect everything and invest nothing. She confuses selflessness with self-neglect, and slowly her soul begins to bleed from unreciprocated love. When you give beyond your emotional capacity, you deplete the very essence that makes you strong. You pour into others while ignoring your own emptiness, and instead of being seen as valuable, you become seen as available, always accessible, always accommodating, always saying yes, even when your spirit is crying no. But value is never preserved through overexposure. Just like oil in the temple was to be handled with reverence, so must you treat your time and your heart. The more available you make yourself without wisdom, the more common you become in the eyes of others. Even good men will begin to take for granted what is always within reach. Boundaries are not barriers to love, they are definitions of worth. When you create limits around your emotional and spiritual resources, you are not being selfish, you are being wise. You are telling the world, what I carry is sacred, and only those who approach you with honor will gain access. Overgiving is not the fruit of the Spirit. Discernment is a woman who gives from fullness blesses, but a woman who gives from emptiness breaks. And no man can restore what you keep allowing to be drained. Constantly seeking validation is one of the most dangerous habits a woman can develop because it places her sense of worth into the hands of others, especially into the hands of a man who may not even understand her value. When you live for approval, you die by rejection. The woman who needs to be constantly reassured, constantly complimented, constantly noticed, reveals a void that only God was meant to fill. No amount of attention can satisfy a soul that doesn't know its own identity. And when a woman doesn't believe she is enough, she begins to perform, pretend, and pursue in ways that compromise her dignity. A woman addicted to validation will compromise her voice just to be accepted. She will shrink herself to avoid conflict. She will say yes when she means no and tolerate what wounds her just to keep someone's attention. But the danger is this: what you compromise to gain, you will eventually lose to exhaustion. No man can consistently validate a woman who has not yet come into agreement with what God says about her. When you don't approve of yourself, His approval becomes your idol. And that idolatry leads to dependency, control, and deep emotional instability. Validation is not a reward, it's a confirmation of what you already know. If you don't know you are loved, chosen, and worthy, even sincere praise will feel temporary. But when you are rooted in God, compliments become encouragement, not necessity. You walk into the room whole, not hungry. You speak from fullness, not fear. And the right man will not be drawn to your need. He will be drawn to your strength. Remember, the woman who knows who she is doesn't need to be constantly reminded. Her presence speaks for itself because heaven already stamped her with approval. Tolerating disrespect and inconsistency is one of the clearest signs that a woman has forgotten who she is. You cannot claim to be a daughter of the Most High and simultaneously allow someone to dishonor your heart, your voice, and your time. Disrespect tolerated is disrespect taught. When a man sees that he can lie, neglect, or belittle you without consequence, he will not change. He will continue. And the longer you allow it, the deeper the damage becomes. Not just to the relationship, but to your soul. Because every time you excuse behavior that wounds you, you are subconsciously saying, this is all I'm worth. God never created you to be a doormat for someone else's brokenness. You were made to be a helper, not a healer of toxic patterns. Inconsistency is not a minor flaw. It is a reflection of double-mindedness, instability, and a lack of commitment. When a man is inconsistent in his actions, his words, and his presence, he is revealing a character issue, not a circumstantial one. And when you continue to wait, hope, and justify it, you are training yourself to expect less than you were created for. You were not made to chase after clarity. You were made to walk in peace. Love is not proven by how much you endure. It is proven by how well you protect what is sacred. If your boundaries are constantly being crossed, if your values are being trampled, and if your spirit is growing weary, that is not a relationship, that is bondage. A woman who knows her worth will walk away from anything that threatens her emotional and spiritual health. Not because she's arrogant, but because she's healed. And a healed woman doesn't make room for confusion, dishonor, or emotional laziness. She makes room for what aligns with her purpose, her peace, and her crown. Playing the role of a savior or mother in a man's life is one of the most subtle ways a woman loses her value, both in his eyes and in her own. God did not design you to rescue a man from his irresponsibility or to parent him into maturity. The moment you step into that role, you exchange your crown for control, and what began as care quickly becomes codependence. A man who is not willing to grow on his own will become comfortable leaning on your strength, not to rise, but to remain. And while you carry him, he will lose the desire to stand. That is not love, that is dysfunction. Many women take pride in their ability to fix, to pour, to carry, but what they don't realize is that healing someone who refuses to be whole is spiritual suicide. You begin to lose pieces of yourself, dim your own light, and silence your needs just to maintain a connection with someone who hasn't earned the right to walk beside you. The role of a mother is sacred, but in a relationship, it becomes a trap. Because a man does not fall in love with his mother. He may depend on her, rely on her, but he will not truly respect or pursue her the way he was designed to pursue a woman. When you take responsibility for a man's growth, you rob him of the opportunity to lead, to rise, and to be accountable. And when he no longer has to be responsible, your strength becomes a burden rather than a blessing. You were created to walk beside him, not ahead of him. If he needs a mother, let him return to the one who raised him. But as for you, know your place, know your worth, and never confuse nurturing with enabling. A woman of purpose doesn't carry dead weight. She walks with those who are ready to build. Suppressing your voice to keep the peace is not humility. It is silent surrender. When a woman silences her truth to avoid conflict, she is not preserving love. She is burying herself alive. Your voice is not just sound, it is the expression of your identity, the carrier of your convictions, and the echo of the wisdom God has placed within you. When you suppress it, you disconnect from your authority. And when a man becomes comfortable with your silence, he stops seeking your heart, your perspective, and your presence. What you silence to survive, you will eventually resent. Many women believe that keeping quiet protects the relationship, but a relationship that requires your silence to survive is already in danger. Peace built on silence is not peace, it's fear in disguise. The woman who constantly bites her tongue, walks on eggshells, and holds back her God-given insight is not walking in love. She's walking in bondage. And over time, that suppression turns into self-abandonment. You begin to lose the ability to advocate for yourself, to ask for what you need, and to walk in the truth that sets you free. God never created you to be invisible in order to be loved. You were designed to speak with wisdom, to challenge with grace, and to contribute with boldness. Your silence does not make you easy to love. It makes you easy to overlook. And when a man no longer hears your voice, he begins to forget your value. A woman who knows her worth will not trade her voice for comfort. She will speak, not to control, but to align the relationship with truth. And the man who is truly sent by God will not be intimidated by her strength. He will be sharpened by it. Because when a woman speaks from her spirit, heaven listens, and so should he. Compromising your standards for the sake of attachment is the silent erosion of your soul. It is the slow and quiet way a woman forfeits her dignity in exchange for the illusion of being wanted. When you lower your expectations just to keep someone close, you are not building a relationship, you are building a prison. You begin to edit your desires, minimize your values, and accept less than you deserve, all in the name of love. But love that requires you to shrink is not love. It is emotional survival disguised as connection. And survival is not the same as purpose. When you compromise your standards, you don't just bend, you begin to break. You tell your spirit, this is all I can get. You teach your heart to settle for crumbs when you were created for covenant. The problem is not that the man can't meet your standards. The problem is that you've convinced yourself to stop asking for what aligns with your destiny. But what you tolerate today becomes your reality tomorrow. And the longer you stay in a space that dishonors your calling, the more disconnected you become from your original design. God didn't make you to fit into someone else's comfort zone. He made you to live from a place of truth. The moment you begin to confuse attachment with love, you lose the discernment to walk away from what drains you. You stay, not because you're fulfilled, but because you're afraid of starting over. But the fear of being alone should never be stronger than the desire to be whole. Your standards are not walls, they are mirrors of your worth. And any man who is intimidated by them is not prepared for the weight of your calling. Do not apologize for wanting more. Do not shrink to be chosen. The woman who walks in divine identity does not chase love. She attracts it by refusing to abandon herself. Your value is not negotiable, and your identity is not up for debate. To walk in your divine purpose means to guard your heart, protect your dignity, and refuse anything less than what God has ordained for you. Remember, a woman who knows her worth will never compromise her standards, silence her voice, or settle for anything that diminishes her spirit. You are not here to fill voids or fix brokenness. You are here to walk in the fullness of your calling, radiating strength, honor, and grace. Stand firm in who God made you to be and watch how your value becomes undeniable, not because of a man's approval, but because of your unshakable identity in the King of Kings.